Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. And you know what? Today it's a bit funny because honestly, it's pretty stupid. Metacritic are doing a clampdown on user reviews, but they're doing it in a lazy way that I think is essentially not really going to accomplish that much of use at all, and really does show how, in many ways, the gold standard, well, I think it's actually Steam. So that's what's up today. Of course, if you do one thing, consider hitting that subscribe button today. Did you know that 49% of watch time in this channel is from non-subs? And that is a problem we can fix with a click of a single button. So do that, smash that like button, and let's get going. Alright, so what's happened is that there's now a 36-hour waiting time on after a game comes out that you can actually, do a user review. Now, this was first noted by Reset Era posters for an indie puzzler called Superliminal, where basically it was only available to be reviewed by users on the 9th when it actually came out on the 7th, which is, not really great for the whole consumer advocacy side of things, right? Where somebody might actually, want to have a user review. So that's a bit weird. Then, of course, where we all noticed it was Ghost of Tsushima. That's a game that launched on the 17th of July, but of course, for 36 hours, there were no user reviews. And if you actually try to leave one, the site would just say, oh, please consider playing the game more first, which, is, I think, pretty obviously talking about The Last of Us Part 2. Of course, The Last of Us Part 2 was meta-bombed to all hell, as have many titles. Valorant is another example of that. A lot of that, though, because of Vanguard, which, of course, is their controversial anti-cheat solution that, kind of decides it owns a fair amount of your computer, which people were understandably a little bit salty about. So that's basically what has happened here, and the changes, of course, only apply to the game side of things. Now, I do find that to be a bit strange, because review bombing is also very much a thing in movies, so it is odd that they've done it specifically for the video games. What's interesting to me is just how incredibly lazy this is, and how there is such a better solution that they could do very easily by working with stores, one that the games industry would actually probably like them to do. At least I've got to imagine. But really, though, there is just the fundamental thing of review bombing, right? It's just going to happen. I mean, even for Valve, they wrote off a whole bunch of Borderlands 2 reviews as off-topic review activity. I think that was last year. So they've cracked down a little bit as well. But certainly for Metacritic, this is a blunt solution to the problem. Now, let's talk about issues. Number one, it kind of undermines the rationale between splitting reviews between critics and users. And those are reviews that can actually vary for very, very good reasons. Critics and just consumers, well, they're going to have different perspectives on games, and that's something that's really, really relevant to people. So this damages the integrity of that, and it means that day one reviews are less useful for the average consumer. Now, I say that in a general case. I would also say that if something is massively review bombed, that's obviously not conducive to, something that's actually super useful. I mean, if you go through The Last of Us Part 2's initial review bomb, so much of the just default 0-star reviews, or 0 out of 10s, were they people playing the game? No. Did they have really strong criticisms of the game? No. It was just, oh, they did, spoiler, the game's a 0 out of 10. Whereas actually, if you go through some of the more measured critiques of that game, there's a lot more to critique that's actually relevant. So, you run into those issues. Now, what is kind of funny to me is a bit of a situation here where, could those user scores have damaged The Last of Us Part 2? They could have a little bit, but it clearly sold extremely, extremely well. But for Ghost of Tsushima, well, that's a game that I think is quite interesting because, yes, it's got Kurosawa mode, but is it the type of game in terms of its narrative ambitions that's going to wow critics in the same way that The Last of Us Part 2 did? No, and a fair number of reviews, generally it has reviewed extremely well, as I think it deserves from the sliver of it that I've played, but it seems like users are appreciating that game a little bit more than the critics, because some of the narrative things that the critics are maybe hung up about, the users don't really care about as much because of the type of game that it is. So this could be an example where Metacritic's new 36-hour policy is actually damaging a game because of people maybe wanting to leave positive reviews early. So it's a bit of a funny situation. I will say, though, that what is unfortunate about this is it does further certain perspectives. It does further, I guess, some worries that people have, right? There's a big sense out there that journalism is a bit of a clique, and that a lot of people there agree with each other, and sort of agree with each other because of that whole in-group bias situation. And therefore, a lot of people put a lot of stock in user reviews. So I think that by kind of dunking on user reviews by default, this system sort of furthers that divide, and I think it will certainly embolden a lot of people who already have got a negative bias towards the critical reviews. Now, that said, yeah, there's so many times user reviews are essentially useless, and if something gets meta-bombed, usually the story is not the contents of those reviews. Usually the story is the fact that it got meta-bombed because some sort of interesting, spicy-ish drama went down with the game. Now, in terms of other issues here, I mean, that whole launch window review situation is not really that good here. Now, that said, should you be looking at Metacritic for user reviews? No, it's something that we use to laugh at, not really something we should care about. It's where Steam comes in and is actually, you know, useful and good. So, yeah, that's basically what's going on here. I mean, look, Metacritic is basically just a big disaster anyway, and if you actually look through how Metacritic deals with its actual scored reviews, they do so much weighting of different outlets and all of this stuff that, man, you can't really trust Metacritic. I'd recommend OpenCritic over Metacritic any day of the week. Basically, never use Metacritic unless it's a part of a wider story and you're covering that. But yeah, certainly sucks. Now, that said, of course, the problem of review bombs does exist, like AI Somnium Files. We remember that story, right? Where a single person took that from an 8.2 user score to a 1.9 in 24 hours because they were basically obsessed with one of the game's characters. And, you know, the fact that one person was able to do that really does show just how busted Metacritic actually can be. There's then also examples like Shin Megami Tensei and Persona, right? Those are franchises that just randomly got bombed a few years ago. There's Kunai and Insurgency Sandstorm that were also review bombed by a single person. In that case, somebody who created literally hundreds of throwaway email accounts for the express purpose of review bombing, which in that stage is like, what the hell are you even doing with your life if that's something you think that, you know, you should be doing? So basically, this stuff all devalues game reviews. Review bombing sucks, but at the same time, Metacritic have totally bungled, or, you know, they've just done this in the worst way, because here's the thing. They could have applied a modicum of effort. They could have worked with storefronts to actually do some sort of verified purchase thing. They could have done that if they really wanted to put in the effort. I think it would have been better for just about everybody involved. But as it stands, no. They just went with a blunt, hand-fisted approach that I think nobody will really appreciate that much, right? Like, you can verify ownership fairly easily, and GOG, as an example, they have solved this problem. Their stuff's pretty good. And then there's other things, like maybe for reviews, there could be a way to segment them. I mean, as an example, I think Valorant, great game. Vanguard, not really that good. So is there any situation where we should maybe have sort of reviews about the game, but then like separate caveats or things you should be aware of? I'm not really that sure. Another example, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, like whatever you think about that game, I mean, it was a bit shit at launch being real, but the microtransactions were like another thing. So, you know, it's interesting how we could try to surface those kind of like additional maybe meta complaints. But the overall thing I would say is, if you're going to trust one form of user review ever, anywhere, make it be Steam. Now, sometimes a game doesn't come out on PC, right, so that's not really that useful, but Steam, I think, has got the best user review system. If a review bomb happens, you can actually look at the graph on Steam. It is so much more useful, it's the gold standard, and it's what everybody should be trying to achieve. But as it stands, Metacritic, a really not that useful site that just feels shady to me in how it weights its reviews and sorts through all of that stuff in the critic end, and has just always had a total just cesspool of a user review section that they never really implemented well. Yeah, it's no surprise to me that they have just been completely lazy in how they've tried to solve this problem. Shouldn't be a surprise to you either, and that's why you should use Steam reviews, and people who are actually setting up user reviews should pay heed to Valve, or of Valve. They should look at what Valve did. So there you go. That's latest little bit of industry biz that's going on. Let me know what you think. Does this maybe further some sort of divide between like critic reviewers, like professional ones and user ones? I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think. So do let me know. And of course, if you do one thing, that 49% of watch time coming from non-subscribers, let's see if we can move the needle there by hitting that sub button. So with that said, thank you very much for watching today's video, and I will see you next time.